I am honored to introduce our next session, Data Science that Works with and for Our Communities. Our moderator, John Kropko, is an assistant professor in the School of Data Science and a leader in the Charlottesville data science community. He volunteers with Code for Charlottesville, the local chapter of Code for America, and recommends that students interested in learning more about data science should volunteer to do a community service project with a data component. Today's panel features a number of John's recent and past partners: Joy Shio, MSDS 20, Christoph Furman, UVA PhD student in quantitative psychology, Lucas Lyons, systems performance analyst for the Charlottesville Fire Department, and Abigail Cox of Smart Seville. Please join me in welcoming John and data science in the community.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And thank you everybody for being here today. I'm very excited about this panel. Code for Charlottesville is a volunteer organization based in the city of Charlottesville. We're very lucky to be able to have a lot of volunteers and a lot of partners, both in the city, in the community, and at the university. We are a local chapter of Code for America, which has brigades, we call them brigades, all around the country that bring together volunteers with tech and data and design skills to work together on community service projects, things which benefit local government or local nonprofits. And so here today, there are two projects that Code for Charlottesville has been running. But Code for Charlottesville is far from the only organization in town that is doing work involving both technology data and the community at large. Smart Seville has been doing this kind of work for a very long time, and they're just fantastic. And Abigail Cox is here from Smart Seville and will be presenting one of their recent projects. And we also have a tradition at UVA of research that is done to benefit communities. And Joy is here to talk about her project on eating disorders and employing machine learning. And so let's get right to it. So I think I'd like to start with Christoph and Lucas. If you guys would be willing to talk us through your project.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, John. Could I have my slides up, please? And I will be kind of going through these slides, and Lucas and I are more than happy to answer any questions at the end of the talk in the discussion section. So today, what I'll be describing is a project that Lucas and I and several other people worked on with Code for Charlottesville that we somewhat euphemistically entitled Reaching for the Stars and Landing on the Moon, to describe kind of how a very ambitious and technical machine learning project kind of got superseded by something else that was much less flashy, but no less impactful, and I would actually argue potentially more impactful than the original project that we started with. So if I could have the next slide, please. So the initial problem was to help develop a fire severity score for firefighters to kind of give them a heads up when responding to a fire. So the idea was a fire is called in, the address is put in, and then the fire department gets some kind of score that says, this might be how bad this fire is. So it can really help with the resource allocation. And there was additional ideas to also include things in this heads up that would help firefighters more effectively respond, such as, does this structure have a basement? Is it a known hoarder house, that could potentially be very dangerous? And what we had to go on originally was historical fire data that had happened in Charlottesville. And even though this was very useful, it had very few relevant features that fire experts would think would be important in developing this kind of score, such as how many stories is the house, when was it built. And so one of the first things that we needed to do was kind of find the data in order to create this scoring mechanism. Quickly, we ran into another issue, which is that it's very difficult actually to predict when a fire is going to happen. And also, it's difficult to quantify the severity. Part of that is due to the Charlottesville Fire Department is very good at their job. And one of the ways that you would probably quantify is a fire severe was there a fatality? And Lucas, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's not been a fire-related fatality in Charlottesville since 2012.
Yes, that's correct.
So go Charlottesville Fire Department. Next slide, please. So to get all of the relevant data that we needed to succeed in this project, we were going to get all of the real estate data in Charlottesville, so residential structures and commercial structures. So all these structures could potentially be used in developing the scoring method. And the way that we were going to get that data is using the Charlottesville Open Data Portal. If you haven't used it before, it's really, really cool. It is kind of this portal that has all of this public data that across so many different domains of Charlottesville, property, crime, demographics, and actually recently the historical fire data that I mentioned was added as well. So you can look at that. The files are actually, pretty easy to download. They're very clean in the sense of it doesn't take a lot to actually get it readable. And it comes with a lot of instructions on how to merge with other tables that are available. So that was really, really awesome. However, there were many hidden issues and caveats to manipulating and merging this data that kind of made us stop and reassess where we should go forward with this project. So if I could get the next slide, please. So this is actually a paper that one of the people on the team did, I think, for their capstone project for the School of Data Science, Lucas Bean, and he did this with some colleagues. And what they did was they went through the Open Data Portal and actually found a lot of issues. The biggest ones were there was lack of uniformity across departments to where there's no central authority that is maintaining and developing these tables put on the Open Data Portal. And so each department is kind of responsible for what data they put out, which kind of led to some difficulties in knowing what data was supposed to mean, and it kind of sometimes would lack consistency. Another big issue was there was largely a lack of primary keys in this data. So merging beyond 2 or 3 tables became very difficult. And for this project, there were going to be many, many tables to merge to get all the relevant data in one place. There are also incorrect update timestamps. So when you would go on there to download some data to see when was the last time this was updated, that wasn't always accurate. So for teams using this data, we would highly recommend that you download the files as a group and kind of work on those, because it doesn't always let you know when it was updated. And the updates not only change the number of observations, but they also can change the spelling of the columns in the data. And finally, the data dictionaries provided were either incomplete or incorrect. And due to this, we kind of decided to change the focus of our project, where we went a fire severity score would be very, very interesting and very cool and very flashy. But really what was needed was a place where all of this data could be aggregated into one table. And the reason that we thought that this would be the most impactful is that Lucas had talked about other projects that the fire department wanted to use this data on and other projects in the city. And so actually getting all this data together would be very, very useful for other data scientists and other community members to use. Next slide, please. So we decided to kind of recalibrate, and there were 3 large issues that we had to deal with. The first was defining these fundamental units of analysis, which took a lot of meetings to figure out what to do. Part of the reason is that we wanted something that was actually useful and readily interpretable by firefighters. If you're not familiar with geospatial data, which is what we're using, you often have geographic areas divided into parcels, and these are largely legal kinds of grid structures and may not necessarily map to how you would think about specific areas. So many addresses could be on one parcel, and actually one address could be split across parcels. And what we came to kind of find a middle ground was, instead of using parcel, which is more general, or specific address, which is very specific, that what we did was structure, which is kind of this nice middle ground, because mega structures could actually have multiple addresses in them. Another issue was that there were different conventions across and actually within tables. So for instance, sometimes street numbers would be put as a range instead of a specific number, and this range was not consistently encoded. So a range might be 1705-1707, and sometimes even within the same table, you would see 1705-07. So there were a lot of edge cases that required more or less manual checking to do. And finally, we had to create our own primary keys by merging a lot of the columns together. And this was something that was very difficult. And there was a time there where we felt a little pessimistic about this. And then another student that had graduated from the School of Data Science joined our team and kind of solved our problem very quickly. And it was quite nice. And so it was this nice kind of group effort where everyone on the team really had their own skills, and just none of us could have done it without anyone else being in that team. Like I said, the largest amount of time was just understanding the structure of the data. The actual code to merge isn't that complicated, but what is complicated is knowing how all of these pieces fit together. And that's what took the longest amount of time. And the mantra we kind of told ourselves is, perfect is the enemy of good. This final data set that we produced doesn't contain every single structure in Charlottesville, because there were just some irreducible issues with certain kinds of data sets, but it largely has most of the structures in Charlottesville, and it's actually being refined to help with some of the edge cases. And we're hoping that pretty soon this will be on the open data portal, so no one else has to go through what we did. Another slide, please. And so the big lessons that I hope people can take away from this, and it's definitely what we took away from this, is that when trying to help your community through data science, it's absolutely essential to partner with community and government officials that have subject matter expertise. There was no way that the people on the team with just the data science skills were going to be able to solve this problem without Lucas Lyons being there, who's a member of the Charlottesville Fire Department, and Doug Caldwell, who's a community member who just really knows the data and just volunteers his time to really understand the data and how it all fits together. Because there would be ideas that we would have, and one of them would probably be like, well, that actually doesn't mean what you think it means. And it really strengthened the project. Another thing is that I think sometimes as data scientists, we want to do the most complicated random forest bootstrapped massive dimensionality reduction model that we can, because it would be really, really cool. And we think, oh, this is what the community needs. Well, really what we need to do is listen to the community, to what they need and what they think is going to be the most useful, because they're the ones who have to deal with this data and have to implement policy changes based on this data. And finally is that data scientists of all skill levels can help their community with their skills, because we just merged some data sets together and that had a positive impact. And it wasn't that was easy. It was actually very difficult, but it's not something fancy to say, oh, I merged these tables. But it really did help. And I just really enjoyed work on this project, and it's really made me want to keep, using my skills to help my community more. And the final slide, if we could go to that, is just the acknowledgement of all the people that helped, that were absolutely instrumental. And we're just very grateful that all of these people were able to put their skills to use to better the Charlottesville community. Thank you.
Thank you, Christoph. Great. Let's move on to Abigail Cox.
Great. And can I have my slides up as well? So thank you, John. Very glad to be on this panel. As John said, my name is Abigail Cox. I am the Program Associate with Smart Seville. The Center for Civic Innovation was launched as a project of Smart Seville last fall. Can I have the next slide, please? So I'm going to talk about the Center for Civic Innovation, or the CCI, kind of in 4 parts. I'll be talking less about the details of each of these parts and more about what are essentially 4 different methods of community engagement. So we'll start by talking about the CCI as a collaborative space, and then we'll talk about our Civic Innovation Fellowship Program. We'll move on to our data collaboratives, and then finally we'll touch on a project called Network Public Spaces. Can I have the next slide, please? So the CCI was launched in September of 2019 as a project of Smart Seville, a community-based center in Charlottesville designed to be a space where community residents, local governments, and UVA faculty and students can work together to address some of the biggest challenges that our region faces. We strive to use creative problem-solving methods, technology, and data to support civic innovations to make our community a better place to live and work. I don't know if our slides are going to be available after this, but if you want to visit the CCI online, the link is there at the bottom of the slide. It's just cci.smartseville.com. And we'll go to our next slide, please. So this slide shows some of our guiding values for the CCI. We started with a physical space on the downtown mall available for collaborative work. Some of the work being done in the space was part of other Smart Seville or CCI initiatives, but some of it was also community partners using the space. So John's already talked a little bit about Code for Charlottesville, but one of the things that they were doing is they would meet on grounds once a month, and then once a month they would meet in the CCI. And so we provided that space in the city to help make it more accessible to volunteers who are members of the community and not necessarily affiliated with UVA. Because, you know, if you want community participation, it can be very helpful to actually be in the community. So having that physical space off grounds was a good way to kind of skirt that town and gown divide that so many college towns experience. We also did our best to promote all of Code for Charlottesville's hack nights because the work that they do aligns so perfectly with our values that it was really important to us to help champion that work and put it out in front of our network. I know I'm using kind of a lot of past tense words here, and that's because, you know, as we all know, it's not safe to gather in person right now. So we're not currently offering this kind of physical space. Instead, we're really focusing on creating opportunities for collaboration with and in the community. And we'll go to the next slide, please. So moving on to our flagship program of the CCI is our Civic Innovation Fellowship. So this program is designed to provide civic innovators in our community with the space, network, and support to successfully reach their goals. This program is really important to us because rather than kind of top-down innovation, where, you know, either researchers from the university or local government departments are working on projects and want public engagement, this fellowship supports community members who are so this fellowship supports community members who are already doing work in the community in sort of a bottom-up fashion to connect them with the right people and resources to increase the effect or reach of their projects. I'm not going to go into the details of what each of their projects were, but you can see on the left side of the slide our inaugural cohort of fellows, and over here on the right is a list of the kind of supports that we are offering through the fellowship. I will note that this fellowship launched in January with the intention to host a community showcase event in May. So this was obviously very much impacted by the pandemic. Not all of these components worked out exactly the way we were hoping. And so instead of that community showcase event, each of our fellows created a presentation. You can read a recap of the whole thing. online. You can see the link there is just bit.ly/CCI fellow. We are going to do this again in 2021. And now we're planning for something that's going to be more virtual, so we won't have to pivot in the middle. But again, this is really just the focus here is identifying people in the community already doing work to address a need or a gap that they see with a solution that they've identified. So we'll go on to the next slide, please. Okay, so moving on to our data collaboratives. The goal of our data collaboratives is to connect local government and organizations with citizens, students, and professionals who have formal data backgrounds in order to analyze existing data sets, improve data collection, and strengthen data systems. We always try to include a resident member, often someone who's not a data professional, but who is interested in the topic in each group. So just by way of an example, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our Airbnb or short-term rental supply collaborative. This collaborative started last year when the CCI was invited to participate by a member of Charlottesville's Housing Advisory Council, or HAC. We established the data collaborative first with a resident who is a data scientist and also a student at UVA's School of Data Science. This initial meeting, or their initial meeting, was also with the zoning administrator and a planning commissioner, and they used that opportunity to really kind of focus kind of the question they were going to be working on. And what they came up with was, to what extent are properties in Charlottesville being used as full-time Airbnb properties? After this first meeting, the collaborative, asked for relevant public data, and we also helped find additional residents to participate on the collaborative as needed. Once they had the data in hand, they had a series of meetings and eventually produced a report to share with the HAC, the Housing Advisory Committee. And I'm not going to kind of go into the details of that report. One, because I'm not a data scientist, but also because the report speaks for itself. If you want to read it, it is available online. And I put a link there as well, bit.ly/rentalcollab. They did a lot of great work. I recommend taking a look. So these data collaboratives are very different, but I think a good complement to the work that is being done through the Civic Innovation Fellowship. So rather than that kind of bottom-up approach, this one is almost a little bit more top-down. So we have, residents being engaged as collaborators, but it's on work being done either with or at the request of local government. So just a different kind of approach. And we'll go to the next slide, please. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you a little bit about an ongoing project called Network Public Spaces. This is a collaboration for the CCI with the UVA School of Architecture-based project, which is called Network Public Spaces and is led by Mona El-Khafif and Andrew Monshine. And eventually it's going to result in an installation in the Belmont neighborhood of Charlottesville. What kind of installation? It is going to be a sort of infrastructural art installation that in some way is going to express data collected by sensors in the area. So we don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet. We don't know exactly what the sensors are going to be, what kind of data they'll be collecting, but it could be something along the lines of a light installation that changes color based on air quality or noise level, that sort of thing. The reason kind of behind this project is that sensors are already being used everywhere, right? And residents often aren't involved in planning their use. So the goal here is to include residents from the beginning, find out what they're interested in seeing in terms of the data collected in their communities, what concerns them about having data being collected in their communities, and how they'd like to see that displayed, what would kind of fit aesthetically in the neighborhood. And our role as the Center for Civic Innovation is to facilitate that community engagement. So to this end, we've convened 2 stakeholder groups. The first is made up of Belmont residents of all ages. And then we also have an institutional stakeholder group, and that is made up of representatives from a variety of city departments, including like Public Works, Neighborhood Development Services, IT, that sort of thing. And we also have a couple of other community organizations represented, including JABA and the Belmont Arts Collaborative. So far, these groups have each met once, virtually, of course, and they'll continue to do so. And really the goal here is to make sure that the residents of the community where this installation is going, so specifically in Belmont, that they're actively engaged in the process from the beginning on. And then I just have one more slide. So that's all. I know it was really a brief look into 4 different kinds of things, 4 different approaches to community engagement. Really just wanted to highlight those different approaches. So if you're interested in working with us or have questions that don't end up being answered today, you can reach us at info@smartcville.com, and I'm happy to take a look. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Abigail. So the 2 talks that we've heard so far during this panel refer to projects which are completed or are already in the books. We have a talk that is just getting started that's going to require a lot of participation from a community. And so I'd like to turn it over now to Joy.
Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. I'm Joy. I'm a master's student at School of Data Science, UVA. Today, may I have my slides up? Thank you. Today, I would like to introduce a data science project for eating disorders community. The website on the slide is the project website called eDetectives. You can visit this website by searching edetectives.blog. Before I go into details of this project, I would like to show some facts about this mental illness and how dieting is related to eating disorders. So next slide, please. Well, according to National Eating Disorder Association, eating disorders are serious. They have the second highest mortality rate of all mental health disorders. The first one is opioid addiction, and 20 million women and 10 million men in America will have an eating disorders at some point in their lives. Next slide, please. And in a large study of teenagers, dieting is considered the most important predictor to eating disorders. Moderate dieters are 5 times more likely to develop eating disorders. Those extreme restricting dieters are 18 times more likely to develop eating disorders. And Americans spend over $60 billion a year on dieting or dieting products. Unfortunately, social media is fostering the dieting culture and making it worse. The online forums like subreddits create an anonymous community for both dieting communities and eating disorder recovery communities. Next slide, please. So as data scientists, how can we early detect and early prevent eating disorders in a society that dieting culture is so prevalent? Here's my answer. eDetectives is a data science project using machine learning and deep learning to predict whether a social media post contains higher risks of eating disorders or not. We will build an NLP classifier to monitor eating disorder mentalities or behaviors in a social media post, especially those posts submitted to dieting forums. Next slide, please. The data we're going to use are the posts submitted to subreddit forums. We collect those posts from 4 different groups of subreddit forums: eating disorder forums, dieting forums, general health-related topic forums, and some other irrelevant forums for comparison. And from this word cloud, we can see the frequently used words in eating disorder forums include eat, feel, binge disorder, and recovery. In the dieting forums, we observe more words like lose, weight, diet, and calorie. And in general health forums, we have more objective and neutral words like cook, recipe, and gene. And in other control group forums, we just have more random words like dog, President Trump, and house. Next slide, please. We are now facing a challenge. Well, we only have the text posts, and we know where those posts come from, but we don't have professional diagnosis on those posts. In other words, we are looking for volunteers to help us label the dataset and identify the behaviors and mentalities shown in those posts related to eating disorders. I will describe it in a more detailed way in this video. Please. In this video, I will show you how to volunteer in eDetective's project and help us collect a better labeled dataset. So once you are in the eDetective's website, edetectives.blog, you can click on Get Involved, and you will be navigated to the data collection workflow we built on Zooniverse. Well, Zooniverse is a people-powered research classification platform. You can help research collect data and classify subjects in the dataset by answering a sequence of questions. If you want to know more details about our workflow, you can click on Learn More or About. And if you want to start right away, you can click on Classify or Get Started. Once you get started, this is the interface you will see. If you need help or if you need guidance, you can click on Tutorial at any time. And it will tell you what you are expected to do throughout the whole workflow. Before you answer any questions to the survey, you will need to have a Zooniverse account and sign in so that your answers to the questions can be saved on Drive. In this workflow, you will read the image of a post on the left and select the best answer of the question on the right. That's it. It's simple. And let's get started. So for this example, it looks like it mentioned behaviors like binge and overeating, but however, it's actually an irrelevant post because it doesn't mention any behavior or mentality about the main character, him or herself. So we can click on it's an irrelevant post. However, if you feel very unsure about the answer, you can click on this link to get any hint for this question. And this hint also offers more detailed explanation or definition of the terms shows in the question. And once you have the answer, you can click on Done and move to the next post. And in this post, it looks like the main character is not yet recovered, so you can choose Not Yet. And also again, if you need help, you can click on the hint. And we move to the next question. Yes, it looks like there's some restricting behavior in the post, so we can select Yes. And also, if you need help with this question of this task, you can click on the hint and go next question. Once you finish all the questions about this post, you can click on Done or click on Done and Talk. If you click on Done, it will move to our next subject or next post in the dataset. And if you click on Done and Talk, you can send us any comments on this subject or on this post, or you can send us any feedbacks about the workflow and questions and through this way. And that's it. Well, thanks for watching. Yeah, this is a workflow. We can collect more well-labeled data set. Once we have the well-labeled data set, we will feed them into our NLP classifier. We have a baseline model already built. We have a RNN classifier. The architecture includes several layers of LSTM and several layers of fully connected neural networks. So we have already pre-trained this model on our current dataset to predict whether this post, which forum this post comes from. And the confusion matrix gives us some interesting insights that there are more than 10% of dieting posts are predicted to come from eating disorder forums. So there might be some major similarity between the posts submitted to eating disorder forums and the dieting forums. Next slide, please. After we train our NLP classifier, we plan to deploy it on any application platforms. We can use web-based platforms, and also we can use mobile app platforms like Google Cloud or Android or iOS apps. The software we are going to build is called ED Safe Space. For people who are struggling at the early stage of eating disorders, they might feel ashamed and afraid to reach out for help. And they also feel afraid to tell close friends or others about their thoughts and behaviors. So we hope we can create a safe space for them to send a message to the machine, and we will give helpful feedbacks by according to the prediction from our NLP classifier. And also, doctors can send those messages they consider to be containing higher risks of eating disorders to our machine and help us update our NLP classifier. And next slide, please. We are currently looking for volunteers to help us label the dataset. And also, if you have any interesting ideas, feedbacks, or questions, please visit edetectives.blog and send us a message through this website. We are more than happy to hear back from you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Joy. So in the interest of time, there's one more talk, but it's one that I was supposed to give, so I think we'll just skip that one and get straight to some questions while we still have some time. So one question, this is for Christoph and for Lucas. Specifically about Charlottesville, community members can petition the city not to list their information on the GIS. Did the city disclose this so that you could take that into account when doing that project?
I did not know.
Hey, John, this is Lucas. I do not believe we noticed anything in the data sets. I didn't see a lot of people who omitted their information. So I would say that affects less than 1 or 2% of all of the GIS real estate information in the city.
Are there other sorts of any kind of legal hurdles or any rules governing data collection and dissemination that presented a roadblock or a challenge for you?
So we worked exclusively with data that's written to the standard of the National Fire Incident Reporting System, which is publicly available. You can request that from FEMA. You can get 5 years of data from thousands of fire departments all across the US. When you get into EMS data, you start to deal with HIPAA restrictions, and we do run EMS calls that turn into INFRS reports, but those do not have any medical information about patients in them.
Thank you. Have another question here about Joy's project. So the question is, so excited about Joy's project. I've used Zooniverse for other projects and just hopped onto yours. If I have feedback about the questions, what's the best way to send it?
You can just finish the workflow through answer all the questions in the survey and click done, and it will automatically collect it to the Zooniverse platform, and we can then download a well-formed table from the Zooniverse. Thank you.
And a follow-up question for you. In the workflow, are the posts only seen by one person, or does the same post show up for multiple people?
The same post will show up for multiple people, and more than 3 people have already classified this post. It will be labeled as finished. This subject is finished.
Thank you. I've got a question for Abigail. So all of the projects through Smart Cville and through the Center for Civic Innovation, almost all of them involve a partnership between academic researchers or tech professionals and community members. And so when thinking about those partnerships, what are some things that you've done to help those partnerships succeed? And what are some pitfalls that people should maybe keep in mind and try and avoid?
Sure. I think a big thing that to keep in mind to make sure that those partnerships do succeed is to approach the community members as like true collaborators and experts in their community, in the needs of the community or their neighborhood or whatever it is that you're asking them to come and contribute as, rather than just sort of, an opinion, to really count that that expertise as useful. And also just to have sort of a specific, not too large a scope, I guess. And that probably works for all kinds of projects, but specifically if you're trying to work with community members, have a specific ask, and that'll make it go a lot more smoothly.
And that sort of, so a specific ask going in the direction from the the civic tech side of it to the community side of it?
Yeah, or like in the example of the data collaborative, we were invited to participate and then sort of had to go back in and narrow down the question so that the collaborative knew exactly what they were looking at, what they were looking for, rather than just sort of looking at all of the data around Airbnbs or rental properties, that sort of thing.
I've got another question for Joy here. In order to help with the project on edetectives.blog, are there data science requirements to get involved, or is it possible for anyone to help?
It's possible for anyone to help. We are looking for any kind of support.
And so all somebody has to do is go to edetectives.blog, just enter that in, and then it should be clear how to click through and help.
Yes, just type in edetectives.blog. There are more information, and there are also entrance. You can send us messages or emails. It's all in that website.
Great. And so there's another question about that, about how to get involved. And so it's just edetectives.blog is the place to start.
Yeah.
This question is for Lucas. So when thinking about these partnerships between a tech team and a community partner like the fire department, there's always a point of contact. In this case, you were the point of contact for this project with Code for Charlottesville. What are some things that people who want to do this sort of work should keep in mind about being respectful of your time and your energy? Because I think that there can be a misconception that because people are volunteering it's sometimes easy to overlook the investment that the community is also putting into this. So yeah, do you have any thoughts about what's the best way to like approach you or another community member about doing these?
Sure. So first of all, I have to give props to my chiefs who allowed me to take on this project and to spend time on it. So it helps to have an employer who sees the value in community collaborations like this and to let a certain employee embark on them. So that helps a lot. The other major thing is you want to treat it like an organic relationship. So you need to get to know someone, and your first ask of them when you approach them shouldn't be, do you want to work on a project? But treat them like a human, get to know about their family, their interests, go out for a coffee, a beer, get to know people. It's a small city. That's what I like about Charlottesville. You're going to run into people again and again. So you're going to build relationships over time. So treat it like a relationship and not like the subject matter expert is a gatekeeper or a conduit kind of into an organization where you want to play with their data or solve neat civic problems.
Thanks, Lucas. And there was one more question, and that's how can we best get involved with Code for Charlottesville? Awesome. Thanks for asking. Right now, the best way to get involved with Code for Charlottesville is to join our group on meetup.com. So meetup.com, there's just a bunch of civic organizations, and Code for Charlottesville is on there. So if you go to meetup.com, do a search for Code for Charlottesville, and then just join, then you'll be kept up to date about when we launch new projects and take on new things, new events. Okay, well, I think that's all the time we have. I want to just thank you all. This has been great. I very much appreciate your time. Yeah, thank you again.